Yo, what is going on? Welcome to the channel. I appreciate all the subscribers, viewers, commenters, channel members, all of that channel members. I'm going to come out with some nice early content for y'all this week coming up. I wanted to jump on here and talk about the same thing we did when we looked at P. Diddy's first appearance. I took a look at the first appearance and I identified three things that were mistakes that I believe were made by Eric Adams' counsel. But this is going to be a real life lesson. So if you're watching this live, be prepared to go into law school because it's not going to get too complicated. It's not going to be too complex, but it is going to be kind of a deep dive. So I wanted to jump in. As always, if you're new to the channel, here we talk finance and attorney reaction content to trending topics, news, and current events. If you get some value out of this, I invite you to hit the like button, share, subscribe, all of that good stuff. And I always got to toss out a disclaimer. I'm a licensed practitioner at law, but I'm not your particular specific counselor at law. So not legal financial advice. If you're looking for legal or financial advice, hey, find a professional in your area that makes sure they can get you squared away. All right, so let's go ahead and dive in. Before we dive in, I always got to shout out the comment, especially the first comment of the day. Hey, shout out to R. Royster. I appreciate the comment, the support, as always. The law professors, we on time. This one get deep. I didn't even want it to go this deep, but I was like, it was bothering me, and so I just had to look. So we're going to go ahead and start out just a summary because we went through, and I'll put a link in the video where I went through the indictment. We went through probably about 65, 70% of it to get the gist of what was going on with Eric Adams. Essentially, long story short, if y'all don't know, I'm gonna give y'all a quick recap so y'all know what was going on because I'm not diving back into that complaint. It was too fucking long. I'm not gonna do it. Long story short, Eric Adams was Brooklyn Borough president at some point prior to running for mayor. He established contacts with persons who had ties to Turkey. At some point, it's alleged, according to the indictment, that they started to fund money through his campaign by using straw contributors. What is a straw contributor? Essentially, out of state person, or excuse me, an out of country non resident person, government entity, i.e., Turkey, would donate money to either a United States citizen or someone who's a U.S. citizen who's an employee of a company that was owned by someone with ties to Turkey, and they would make the donations on the behalf of the country. So, Turkish guy has ties with the government. He has his own company. He has employees. He's tell his employees to donate the minimum of $2,000. The employees donate $2,000. The company reimbursed the employees $2,000, and I'm sure they probably gave them a little something on the extra on the front end on the back end for their efforts. Now, in New York, they have a specific statute, which is actually a pretty dope statute, where campaign contributions that come from individual can be increased up to 8 times. The purpose of this statute is to allow one, encourage people to run for politics and also give the residents, the people, a voice that could be comparable to that of corporations because corporations have very, very deep pockets. So that's the gist of it for the most part. Also, there were some trips, there were some hotels, there were some discussions of upgrades that he didn't pay for. There was some, it appears to be bogus attempts as alleged in the indictment to make it look like they were paying for these upgrades when in fact they weren't. Now, essentially, the government's key witness, it looks like it's going to be a staffer that worked for Eric Adams, who was I guess, the tie in everything together. There was multiple Turkish business persons. There was a staffer who had some express communication. That's the long story short for everybody who was here, went through the indictment. Y'all gonna really get some good value out of this one today. Hey, what's going on? Shout out to Justin. Shout out to the moderators. Hey, I appreciate it. I'm trying to upgrade the presentation. You know, y'all giving me so much value and let me entertain y'all. So, or waste y'all time, whatever it is I'm doing over here. I want to try to make it a little bit more cleaner and professional. Okay, so now that we got that, let's go ahead and take a look. Now, these 3 mistakes that he made. One, we talked about yesterday. It was essentially, you shouldn't say anything to show your hand to the opposition. So yesterday, when the attorney was walking with Eric Adams, they had a conversation. It's funny too, because Eric Adams sounds like Hustle Man from Martin. I don't know if y'all know who that is, but when y'all hear Hustle Man or Martin and Eric Adams, you're gonna think it's the same person. But yesterday, the attorney stopped, had some communications after the indictment was unsealed. His client, Eric Adams, was standing there, and he talked about how it was bogus, how the government was withholding exculpatory evidence, uh, essentially evidence that would tend to prove that his client is innocent. He essentially showed his entire hand. So that was point number one. That was easy. Now let's go ahead and look at what happened after the arraignment. So we're looking at what happened after. We're not even going in and getting the court transcripts like we did with Diddy's lawyer, because this one is a little bit more unique. Let's go ahead and cue up the video. And we're only going to probably listen to the first, we're only probably going to listen to the first few 92-minute discounted hotel. It is, but hey, before we even dive in, he actually has a valid legal argument for defense. We're going to talk about it, and I'm going to let you know how I think this is going to play out. Let's go ahead and dive into these few minutes where the attorney is talking and show y'all this is why the mistake number one, yesterday he talked too much. Today, mistake number two, he talked too much. Now, I'm sure the prosecution is aware of the same thing I did, but I'm just a novice. This is not even one of my cases. I'm just listening to it, and I'm going to show y'all exactly how I got to the research that I got to.
The mayor entered a plea of not guilty. He's innocent. Second thing that happened in court today is that we let the court know that next week we'll be filing a motion to dismiss. We expect these charges to be dismissed. You all remember the Brian Benjamin case.
All right, pause right there. I told y'all before when we discussed Diddy's stuff and his lawyers, there's going to be so many motions to dismiss, motion to dismiss certain charges, motions to dismiss everything is going to come first, then motions to dismiss first certain counts. Then they're going to fight over what evidence comes in. So he's saying, hey, we're going to file a motion to dismiss. But this is all I heard. He said, because this is similar to the Brian Benjamin case. Now, I'm not a native New Yorker, but I was like, similar to Brian Benjamin case. Well, who the hell is Brian Benjamin? But let's go ahead, finish listening to what he got to say before we dive into Brian Benjamin.
Mayor, that case was dismissed. Case, similar shaky theory. That case was dismissed. Same prosecutors, same theory. But the spectacle of this so exciting to them that they wanted to bring another one of these cases. This case isn't even a real case. This is the airline upgrade corruption case. The third thing we said is that we demand that they bring exculpatory information and the discovery to court on Wednesday. As you know from looking at the indictment and from what happened in court, there are no emails, text messages, or any corroboration whatsoever that the mayor knew about anything having to do with these campaign donations. The entire body of evidence is one staffer that says there was a conversation. What you have not learned is that that staffer has lied, and the government is in possession of that lie. When that staffer was first interviewed, that staffer said that Mayor Adams knew nothing about this, he was not involved in this, and that he is innocent. They have that information. They have not turned that over to us. They have not turned that over to you. And so it sort of does not surprise us that they did not answer any questions at that press conference, their little press conference the other day. They have no answer for any of these questions. And they didn't want to stick around from questions either. Questions like, why are they doing this? Why are they targeting him? The questions you all started to ask as they were leaving. They normally answer questions. They didn't want to stay for questions in this case. And they left and they made this assertion or this, they implied that somehow he's disappointing people or that people ought to be disappointed in him. It's not him doing this. It's the government, the other government that everybody should be disappointed in, bringing this case against the sitting mayor. I don't have anything further today. And thank you all.
All right, so that was short. That was 2 minutes and 15 seconds. That was pretty much all we needed of that. We might revisit it. Let me go ahead and remove that. We might revisit it. Not loving Puff or Adams' attorney, wishing Johnny Cochran was still here. I think that this attorney is probably a little bit more. He strikes me as a little bit more competent early on, and I haven't even looked at him and his resume. But I think he talks a little bit too much. But him bringing up the Brian Benjamin thing was an actual important thing. Now I don't know if you all are familiar with who Brian Benjamin is, but let's kind of take a look. Let's go ahead and bring up this article so I can get you all familiar with who Brian Benjamin is, why this is important, and this is what attorneys do. We want to find a case that's similar to the case we're working that has the outcome we want, and we're going to make that same argument to the court. So let me go ahead and cue this up. Present share screen. Okay, so I got this on the screen right now. Let's go ahead and do it this way. All right, Brian Benjamin, former lieutenant governor in the beautiful state of New York. Well, I don't know if it's beautiful, some parts of the state of New York. But this person had similar charges when he was in his lieutenant governor role. More importantly, when I went through and was like, let's find out what's going on with Brian Benjamin. He had similar allegations, similar charges, was alleged to have taken advantage of the same uh, New York State program that allows for donations by individual citizens to get a multiplier of 8, essentially. And so I was like, this is interesting. The FBI charged him with very similar crimes. It went to district court. So when you're in federal court, you have like a magistrate judge, which was the first judge that heard like Diddy's bond hearing. That magistrate judge as the lowest level. Then over the magistrate judge, you got the district court judge, the appellate court, then of course the Supreme Court that sits at the top. So during his district court trial, the district court essentially threw out a majority of the bribery charges. So this guy, Brian Benjamin, won at the district court level. We're going to take a look into this article and find out why. He won at the district court level. They threw out the majority of the bribery charges, which essentially were the same type of charges that Eric Adams is facing. The only thing that remained were a few charges that had substantial prison time associated with them, but were much less serious offenses. Now, on appeal, the appellate court, and this article is from, March of 2024. The appellate court said, no, district court. Y'all should not have dismissed Brian Benjamin's bribery charges. You all made an error when you dismissed his bribery charges, and we're going to reinstate the bribery charges that the Southern District of New York had initiated against Brian Benjamin. Now, let's go ahead and dive into this article because we got to know why this happened so we can circle back to the Eric Adams thing. All right, it says this is March of 2024. So this is relatively new. The Second Circuit Court of Appeals on Friday revived bribery and fraud charges against former New York Lieutenant Governor Brian Benjamin that were dismissed after a lower court found that the feds failed to establish sufficient evidence of a quid pro quo between him and a campaign donor. The court said, we conclude that the indictment sufficiently alleged an explicit quid pro quo, the 3-judge panel found unanimously. Therefore, we reverse the judgment of the district court and remand for further proceedings. The decision reinstates the bulk of the corruption case against Benjamin, dismissed by the Manhattan federal court judge Paul Otekin in December of 2022, who found prosecutors had failed to allege a clear and unambiguous agreement between the fallen politician and the late real estate developer Jerry Migdal to steer state funds to a nonprofit Migdal controlled in exchange for illegal campaign straw donations. Straw donations, that's the same thing we talked about with Eric Adams. And this is all what the district court said. Okay, let's go ahead and scroll down because I don't want to get too deep in this. While we agree that the quid pro quo must be clear and unambiguous, there's no reason why it cannot be implied from the officials and the payors' words or actions. In other words, the agreement must be explicit but there is no requirement that it be expressed, reads the decision written by Judge Stephen Menashe. So this is interesting now because now the charges were dismissed initially for this guy, then they were reinstated, and it all went down to the definition of the quid pro quo. Does the agreement to do services for money or campaign contribution, does it have to be expressly stated, or does it have to be implied? Can it be implied from the facts and circumstances? This is a very unique argument. I'm feeling a little nerdy about it because it's kind of exciting. So the district court in this case said that no, the quid pro quo has to be expressed. And because the federal government failed to articulate that it was an express agreement of quid pro quo, we're dismissing these charges. On appeal, the appellate court was like, nah, pump y'all brakes, district court. We agree that the quid pro quo has to be unambiguous, but we are of the belief that the quid pro quo can be implied from the context or from the conduct of the payor and the person who is actually has the power to implement whatever the favor or benefit is. So now we got two schools of thoughts. Y'all let me know which one you all think makes more sense. Just for me, just hearing it, as I haven't dove into a deep research, it would seem that a quid pro quo can be implied from the conduct, just like a lot of other things can be implied from the conduct. Hell, they'll imply marriage from the conduct if you stay in a common law state and you live with somebody for more than a certain amount of years. So on its face, I just initially think that, well, you should be able to imply a quid pro quo based on the conduct of the parties. But this is what the courts are arguing about. The lower level court dismissed it because they said it has to be expressed. The appellate court reinstated all of this dude's charges, and they said that, no, it doesn't have to be expressed. It can be implied. The other thing that I wanted to touch on is, and I don't know if y'all caught this, it looks like I wanted to catch this clear and unambiguous agreement. Okay. It says between a fallen politician, who is the defendant in this case, and a late real estate developer. Now, I will tell you, it's a big benefit for this guy, Brian Benjamin, who it looks like Eric Adams' team is going to try to steal this argument. Is a big deal for him that they said that Migdal is late, and he's late for court, which means he's a decedent. It's a big help when your key witness is no longer here. So the facts are really turning out favorable for this guy. All right, so let's go ahead and go back down. All right, I'm gonna read just briefly. Some of what was alleged here because y'all got to know the facts. Now we know what the legal arguments are. Does the quid pro quo have to be expressed or can it be implied? That's what we're arguing over right now. It says the up and coming Harlem politician who tapped her as second in command after former Governor Andrew Cuomo stepped down amid a swirl of sexual misconduct, resigned as deputy governor in disgrace within hours of pleading not guilty to corruption. It says prosecutors allege that as a state senator, he abused his authority to allocate $50,000 in state grant funds to Migdal's nonprofit, Friends of Public School Harlem. Migdal, in turn, engineered thousands of dollars of small dollars donations to Benjamin's failed New York City comptroller campaign and others' names, including a 2-year-old, to help Benjamin procure public matching funds. This is what we talked about, the matching fund for individual persons. So this is essentially what the argument is. Let's see. Benjamin's arrest. Migdal admitted to organizing and concealing tens of thousands of dollars in fake campaign contributions to boost Benjamin's campaign. Blah, 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 blah. Okay. So long story short, that's all we need to take away from that. We don't need to do a deep dive in that. But this is actually an interesting legal argument when you think about it. Y'all let me know if y'all think in a bribery case, does the quid pro quo have to be expressed through a statement that can be proved or verified, or can it be implied from the conduct? I tend to lean towards implied, but that's just my take. Yeah, they do. Most people, like, it's very, well, most people only have the opportunity. You only have really good opportunities to do bad things when you have a lot of power. Especially bad things that relate to financial crimes. That's normally what I see. Express versus implied conduct. I'm learning today. Hey, I know it sounds like some contract stuff, right? It sounds like some contract stuff. Now, all right, now we're gonna take a look at something else interesting because I was like, wait. So in 2022, the Fed charged Benjamin. His case got dismissed. This year in March, the appellate court reinstated it. And I was like, what happened with this guy's case? So I'm looking all over. I'm looking all over because I'm like, this is the argument that Eric Adams' attorneys is going to make. Let me go ahead and find out what happens to this case. So, of course, I did a little digging. And lo and behold, let's pull up this opinion from the United States Supreme Court. And this is a fresh case. Brian Benjamin versus the United States of America. So now we're going to get some granularity on what the issues are. And this case was authenticated, signed by the courts on August 5th of 2024. So this is a writ of certiorari that should be granted. This is essentially Benjamin's attorney making a petition to the United States Supreme Court for them to hear this case. Now, I'm not going to go into detail on how the Supreme Court can hear a case, if it's a constitutional issue, all these other ways, but they're saying, yo, you all should hear this case. And if I'm Eric Adams' attorney who talks too much, I would probably stop talking, but I would take a look at this case because this case is interesting. So it says, question presented. And this is how you always start off legal writing. When the government charges an elected official with bribery, let me see. All right. When the government charges an elected official with bribery for accepting campaign contributions in exchange for lawful constituent services, now right there is the first issue that he's going to have if he's using this argument. Because we got to think back to Eric Adams. What was the quid pro quo in Eric Adams' case? It was something that I don't think is lawful to begin with. So it says that the goal is, as his attorney, I want to find a case that's similar to mine so I can use it. As the prosecutor, I want to find why this case doesn't apply because there are certain facts that are different. So the question that the court has here is whether government charges an elected official with bribery for accepting campaign contributions in exchange for lawful constituent services. In Eric Adams' case, he got money. He got a bunch of money, allegedly, and some free stuff at Turkish Airlines and exquisite hotels in exchange for, well, what did they want? Was it a lawful constituent service? Because if it's a lawful constituent service, this case is more and more favorable to Eric Adams' attorney. But if we think about Eric Adams' case when we went through it, what he actually wanted, or what the Turkish representatives wanted, was him to essentially allow for the building of a Turkish consulate without having the appropriate regulatory guidance that everybody else would get. They wanted him to lean on the fire departments to say, hey, don't worry about all the issues we have going on. Just go ahead and okay everything so they can build this Turkish consulate prior to the Turkish president coming over. So already, even though I think this is the argument he's going to make, I found one thing that's wrong with it. This question is for lawful constituent services, asking somebody to ignore safety regulations so a building can get built and ignore fire codes don't sound like no lawful shit to me. So that's point number one. But let's go ahead and dive in a little bit further. Let me see. Adams' attorney said the staff originally told the truth, then lied. They have this proof, and the DAs know this. Are they requesting a dismissal? They are going to request a dismissal. What's going on, BTB? I appreciate you tuning in. AP, I don't know if that in and of itself is going to be the sole basis for the dismissal. And they are requesting, we'll dive into that, but let's go ahead back into this argument. So again, the question, when a government charges an elected official with bribery for accepting campaign contributions in exchange for lawful constituent services. I don't think Eric Adams was lawful, but we're looking at Brian Benjamin stuff. Requires that the government prove an explicit quid pro quo agreement to exchange the contributions for an official act. The question presented, on which the Second Circuit acknowledged the lower courts have failed to provide a consistent and clear answer, is: does explicit mean a quid pro quo agreement of any kind, including one that is inferred or implied, or is a heightened quid pro quo standard necessary in light of the First Amendment principles involved in campaign contribution context? Okay, that question is fairly straightforward. What they mean when they get into the First Amendment campaign contributions, essentially, courts have analogized a person's right to make campaign contributions consistent with your right to free speech. First Amendment, hey, I can say what I want and I can donate who I want to, because it's like me exercising my freedom of speech, as in supporting this candidate. That's all they mean. But that's the question: does the explicit meaning of quid pro quo agreement of any kind, including one that is inferred or implied, or is a heightened quid pro quo standard necessary? That's the question. So let's go ahead and go through this. We're going to skip through the table of authorities, the statement of the case, the factual background, district court proceedings. Let's go and get to the good stuff. And y'all can see, I don't know if y'all can tell, but I'm kind of nerding out because this is dope. What's going on, Common Sense? I appreciate you tuning in as always. But this is getting excited because I'm like, oh man, this is actually a deeper dive than I wanted, but it's actually interesting. Statutory provisions involved. We're going to skip all of the introductions. Statement of the case. Let's see how. Okay, that's not too long. Let's go and read the statement of the case, because I want y'all right now, what his attorneys are going to do, Eric Adams' attorney, is they want these facts to be similar to the facts in his case, which we already did a deep dive on. What the prosecution is going to do is say, yo, these facts in this case that they're going to try to use to support are completely different from what we have going on here. And we already identified the first difference, because it doesn't appear that Eric Adams, his quid pro quo that he had to do was a lawful constituent service. All right, factual background in the Brian Benjamin case. The charges in the indictment stem from purported bribery scheme relating to petitioner Brian Benjamin's 2021 primary campaign for New York City comptroller, a campaign that he ultimately lost prior to. Damn, you cheat and still lose? You guys suck. A campaign he ultimately lost prior to being appointed lieutenant governor to fill a vacant seat in August of 2021. Mr. Benjamin lost his campaign for New York City comptroller in 2019 while serving as a New York State senator representing Harlem and its surrounding neighborhoods. The indictment alleges that a bribery scheme was set in motion during a meeting on March 8th, 2019, when Mr. Benjamin told Gerald Migdal, a longtime supporter who was active in the Harlem community, that he planned to run for New York City comptroller, and asked him to obtain a small dollar contribution for that campaign. Migdal allegedly advised Benjamin that, one, he did not have experience bundling political contributions in this manner, and two, his fundraising efforts were focused on the educational nonprofit that he is alleged to have founded and controlled, Friends of Public School Harlem. And three, his ability to procure contributions for Mr. Benjamin's comptroller campaign was limited in part because potential donors from whom he was likely to solicit contributions were the same donors from whom he had solicited and intended to further solicited contributions. Mr. Benjamin allegedly responded, "Let me see what I can do." Nearly 3 months after the meeting on May 3rd, 2019, Mr. Benjamin allegedly learned he had been awarded up to $50,000 in additional discretionary funding that he could allocate to educational nonprofits in his Senate district. The next day, Mr. Benjamin allegedly advised Migdal that he would seek to allocate this funding to Migdal's school. The indictment does not allege that Mr. Benjamin placed any conditions on his effort to obtain the grant or otherwise link it to any campaign contributions. That's a big point, because they made sure that, these guys at the Southern District of New York are some of the brightest, sharpest legal minds we have in the country. They realized what they left out on this indictment. So the indictment we read the other day on Eric Adams, they made sure to put facts and statements in there to specifically address this point. Because the court said the indictment does not allege that Mr. Benjamin placed any condition on his effort to obtain the grant or otherwise linked it to any campaign contribution. Nor does the indictment allege that Mr. Benjamin made any demands of Migdal when he notified him weeks later on June 20th, 2019, that the Senate had approved the resolution related to the grant. The indictment alleges that 2 weeks later, on or about July 8th, 2019, Migdal provided Mr. Benjamin with 3 checks totaling $25,000 for his Senate campaign, not the comptroller campaign that had been, the subject of their March meeting. During their meeting, Mr. Benjamin allegedly reminded Migdal about the grant to the public school and that he still expected Migdal to procure numerous small contributions for his comptroller campaign. But the indictment does not allege that Mr. Benjamin connected the two or threatened to withhold or cancel the grant if Migdal did not secure the contributions. That's a big point, and that's the big point that the defense is going to try to argue. In September 12th, 2019, Mr. Benjamin publicly presented Migdal and the nonprofit organization with an oversized novelty check for $50,000. The indictment does not allege that either individual said anything about campaign contributions or the grant was ever discussed. From October 2019 to January 2021, Migdal allegedly made numerous contributions to the comptroller campaign, many of which were fraudulently given as part of a straw donor scheme perpetuated by and separately charged against Migdal. The indictment does not charge Mr. Benjamin as part of that scheme. The $50,000 grant was never dispersed to Migdal's school. That was stupid not to charge Benjamin as a part of that scheme. But okay, so that's the background. So now we know what was going on. The folks who were here yesterday, or if you've been watching the news, we know what was going on. What's going on in Eric Adams' case? We know that his attorney brought up the Brian Benjamin case. We had to figure out what was going on. It looked like it was dismissed. Then it got reinstated. Now he's like, Supreme Court, help me out because I don't want to go to jail for a long ass time. And so now we know the facts of Brian Benjamin's case. Now we're going to dive into the arguments that the court made. Remember, what we're looking at is, does a quid pro quo have to be expressed or implied? And when y'all see what the court did, you're gonna be like, man, they pulled they went a whole nother direction and made a left and took us on a wild ride outside of express and implied. But we're gonna get into that because I think it's going to be a good argument. Shout out to everybody in the chat as well. The fact that it might be tied to education makes things so gross. I would have preferred it to be about rats. No, I think in this case, I think these facts are more favorable because whether it's a quid pro quo in Benjamin's case or not, that's arguable. We can argue if it's express or implied or whatever we see the court is going to make us look at that we probably don't want to look at. Whether it's express or implied, I think the one thing that Eric Adams has that's not going to be in his favor is the thing that Eric Adams had the expectation of doing was illegal. Hey, lean on these guys so they violate fire codes and build this building before the Turkish president come over. This case, the thing that he doing is, hey, I got extra grant money. I can give it to any school I want. I just happen to choose your school. Isn't that anything illegal about? He could have gave it to Puffy's school if he wanted to. So, I mean, that's a big distinction. Now, let's go ahead. I want to go ahead and see where the court went. So we talked about what happened in Brian Benjamin's case in district court. District court threw out everything because they said the quid pro quo had to be expressed. So we can skip all of this because I gave y'all the Reader's Digest version. Now we're looking at the appellate court, the Second Circuit decision. The Second Circuit reversed the judgment of the district court because they said, no, a quid pro quo can be implied. All right, so this is what essentially Benjamin's attorney is asking, and I'm thinking Eric Adams' teams is probably going to go this same route. But, and I'm gonna be honest, I haven't dove through this. I kind of skimmed through it like minutes before we jumped in. But I don't think Eric Adams will be able to use this same argument, and I'll tell you why once we get to it. So the courts they're saying, hey, the Supreme Court's intervention is necessary because they're split in circuits. So federal appellate courts in North Carolina, they're saying, some courts are saying that the quid pro quo has to be expressed. Then other courts out in probably some other states in California or some crazy liberal or conservative place, whatever they want to call it, some courts are saying it has to be expressed. Some appellate courts are saying it has to be implied. Because there's this confusion amongst appellate courts, Supreme Court, you all got to figure this out and give us the proper guidance so we can get this right, which is a good point. Now, this is another thing that they did. It says in McCormick, so they're looking at another case. It's a decision that was in the United States Supreme Court, and it says McCormick requires an explicit agreement in the campaign contribution context. Now, I'm not going to go into a super deep dive of why, but it says, let's see. I'm going to read a brief snippet so we can see why this McCormick decision that the Supreme Court had required an express quid pro quo for politicians. Since McCormick, the court has repeatedly emphasized that First Amendment principles require that the government tread carefully when it seeks to prosecute elected officials for accepting allegedly corrupt payments. In McDowell versus United States, the court overturned the bribery conviction of the former governor of Virginia and his wife. That case turned on what constitutes an official act under the bribery statute, but the court spoke directly to what the government is trying to do in this prosecution and to the same danger of chilling lawful political activity. Again, this is something that Eric Adams doesn't have, so it doesn't match up with this argument if this is what they're trying to use. It was lawful for Benjamin to donate that $50,000 grant to any school that he wanted to. It is no way lawful for Eric Adams, as alleged, to lean on the fire department to build a damn building for a Turkish consulate that doesn't meet fire safety protocols. Two different things. All right, we go down, federal election commissions. We're going to skip all this because there's a lot of minutia. Okay, then they said the circuits are split on the meaning of explicit as used in McCormick. While the court has steadfastly upheld the principles underlying McCormick, there has been growing disagreement among the circuit courts, the federal appellate courts, concerning what McCormick held and how to apply its rules. The intervention of this court is necessary to resolve the disagreement and to clarify the rule in this critically important area of law. The decision below, the Second Circuit recognized a conflict among circuit courts interpreting McCormick. The confusion amongst the courts about whether the McCormick standard applies to campaign contribution cases and about what its explicit standard means, other courts had noted the same. And they note a DC Circuit case, United States versus Ring, that says McCormick failed to clarify what it meant by explicit, and subsequent courts have struggled to pin down the definition of an explicit quid pro quo in various contexts. Then it says the United States versus McGregor, another middle district court, but it says the McCormick court, however, did not expand on what constitutes an explicit promise or undertaking. The definition of explicit remains hotly contested. So far, all of this is good because if I recall correctly, and you all let me know in the live, I don't recall, and it could have been in the 25 pages that I said, fuck this, I'm not reading in the indictment. But we read about 70% of it. And I didn't see anything that, if we're looking at the strict hardcore standard of express, this has to be expressly a quid pro quo. I didn't see anything that jumped out as, hey, if you let me rest my head on this nice pillow in this Turkish hotel, I'll go ahead and slide this building through without passing the appropriate regulations by the fire department of New York State. So I didn't see anything that was expressly stated like that, but I think we did, and y'all let me know. I think we did see enough in what was alleged in Eric Adams' indictment that we can imply it from the facts and the circumstances. And I'm leaning towards the implied theory actually makes more sense because at some point, if you all recall, let me go ahead real quick because we got to talk about. Let me do the camera like this. Let's talk about Eric Adams' situation. I don't know. I think it would be crazy for the court to go with an express quid pro quo standard because in Eric Adams' situation, let's remember after the contributions have already came in, after him and his wife and his team have flown all over Turkish Airlines. Remember, at some point, Eric Adams expressly made a phone call to like the chief of the New York Fire Department. The chief had reached out to him before when he first got elected, like, hey, I hope we can still do business. I'm here to serve you. And Eric Adams gave a nonchalant reply. Again, they had another communication, but Eric Adams, the previous communications not related to this, it was kind of the cold shoulder. But Eric Adams specifically reached out to this guy in an attempt to lean on him. And we saw the person who actually came and inspected the building had an email that said, yo, it's too much stuff going on. We can't do this. So I don't think that this case is the greatest case to use for Eric Adams, but this is the argument and the route that his team is going to go. Let's scroll down the Sixth Circuit. We're talking about express or implied. Which one is it? Let's scroll down because I want y'all to see what they're asking the court for. Okay, now their argument is that the Court of Appeals in Benjamin's case was incorrect, that they should lean towards that explicit quid pro quo standard, as we know. But I also want y'all to see the other argument that they make. Second Circuit's decision. This case presents an ideal opportunity to resolve this issue, which I think it does. Okay. All right. So let's get down to what they're asking for. This is where it gets interesting. Okay. Because now we see right here in subsection 4, at a minimum, remand in light of Snyder is warranted. Now, remand is just saying that, hey, best case scenario, if y'all don't decide this the way we want, y'all should punt it back down to the appellate courts and they should decide it based on Snyder, this Snyder standard. So what the hell is the Snyder standard that Benjamin's attorneys is arguing that if he doesn't win at the Supreme Court level, the Supreme Court should give it back to the appellate court and tell them decide this case on the Snyder standard. I want to go up so we can see what the Snyder standard is as they articulate in their argument. Let's see. And I was going to pull up the case, but I was like, no, that'll be too much work. Let's see, Mr. Benjamin, lawful fundraising effort. Courtroom. Let's see, I want to find it. And Snyder decided most recent term, the Second Circuit decision. Let me see. Okay, this is interesting. Okay, so this essentially is what Benjamin's attorney is arguing should happen here. Then we're going to tie this back into Eric Adams because I don't think this case is analogous. So that's one of the main reasons why he should never have said anything, because if I just looked at it after 2 minutes of hearing him talk, I was like, I know the opposing side probably has already done this research. But essentially, let me change the view on this so we can get it up just in case you all want to read. So what Benjamin's attorneys are arguing, the Supreme Court, y'all got to hear this because some courts say it's express, some courts say it is implied. Y'all got to settle this. We say it's express. And because it's not expressly, it's nothing expressed, our client should win and all the charges should be dismissed as the district court did on the first trial round. But if y'all don't agree with us, in the alternative, and that's what you do as an attorney, you always say, Your Honor, we're asking the court to consider A. However, if the court's not inclined to consider A, we would ask in the alternative that the court find B, C, and D. So that's what they're doing. They want everything to go away because they're saying that it should be expressed. But if the court finds that it's not expressed, you all should give it back to the appeal court and tell them to rule in a manner consistent with Snyder. Now let's take a look at what they are asserting that Snyder says. In the alternative, we ask that the court grant certiorari to vacate the decision below and remand for reconsideration in light of Snyder versus the United States, decided in the most recent term of the Second Circuit decision of this case. The defendant in Snyder was charged under one of the same statutory provisions charged here. The court held that a state or local official does not violate bribery if the official had taken the official act before any reward is agreed to, much less given. This is because the statute criminalizes bribes that are promised or given before the official act, but not but not gratuities, which are typically payments made to an official after an official act as a token of appreciation. Here is an alternative basis for dismissing the indictment. The district court held that the explicit agreement this is a dumbass argument. The explicit agreement must precede the official conduct, and found that the indictment, which alleges that Mr. Benjamin procured the grant before he was promised or given a campaign contribution at issue in return, did not meet this criteria. So in Benjamin's case, this is a wild ass argument. I don't think it's going to end well for Benjamin, and I don't think it's going to end well for Adams. But long story short, what Brian Benjamin's attorney is arguing is, we saying this should be expressed. So you should uphold the district court's dismissal of all those bribery charges. But in the alternative, if not, you should kick it back down and tell the courts to rule in line with this court decision. And that court decision essentially said that there's no bribery if the act that's done by the politician is done before the gratuity is given. What? That's an actual crazy asinine argument, I think. I'm going to tell you how this is probably going to end, because this was just filed in August. So the Supreme Court hasn't made their decision if they're going to hear Benjamin's case. I don't think Benjamin's case is going to be, it's interesting. I don't know, now that I think about it, because we do got a Supreme Court that is, they like politicians. Let's say that they like politicians. I would lean towards it's possible to have an implied quid pro quo for a bribe, because if that was the case, if I was a shady lawyer, I would just be like, hey, go ahead, do y'all bribes, but don't put anything in writing. Don't say anything, regardless, because they can't look at the conduct if it's not expressed. So I think that would be a crazy way to go. But hey, our Supreme Court has done some crazy things these past few years, and a few things that were actually I agree with, but they done some crazy shit also. But I don't think in Mr. Benjamin's case, I would be shocked if the court says it can't be implied from the conduct. So I think that Mr. Benjamin is probably going to be, all his charges are likely going to be upheld. The reinstatement of all his bribe charges are going to be upheld, because I think the court is probably going to lean towards quid pro quo can be implied from the conduct. I think they're going to completely reject the argument of looking at it through the other case, the alternative argument that if the services by the politician are done before the gratuity, it can't be a bribe. That's a crazy ass argument. So I don't think this is going to end well for Mr. Benjamin. Let me go ahead and get some of these comments real quick while I'm in here, because I want to make sure I get everybody commenting. I feel like we went through all of these. Extends beyond my summer reader card. Yeah. So a trigger chain of order is being argued here. That is correct. The U.S. Supreme Court has reversed itself over 250 times. It's all BS. Hey, that's actually a very good point that I agree with. I agree with that point completely. I remember in law school, professors telling me about the Supreme Court has to follow precedence of what the previous court did. And if precedence is to stab you, they have to follow it. And I was raising my hand. I was like, well, what if the court was like, we don't want to follow that? Then what happened? And they just was like, that never happens. Now look at what we got. So I agree that, hey, shout out to you in that comment. That's an actual great comment. Let's see. Didn't the staffer allegedly suggest making it appear as though he paid for the airline tickets and they charged him $1,000? That's absolutely correct. So this legal argument of Benjamin that it appears that Eric Adams' attorney is going to take is not going to be a winning argument for a few reasons. First and foremost, the quid pro quo that the politician had to do. In Benjamin's case, he had the right to donate that money to whatever school or schools he wanted to. In Eric Adams' case, he had no legal, lawful right to say build a building and build that building violating fire codes that the state has set up. That's one is an actual legal act that the person had the right to do. The other is an illegal act. So I don't think this argument is going to hold weight. The other thing that's going to kick him in the ass is, bro, you actually went to the chief of the fire department to lean on him after the inspector said that this building was fucked up and they needed a whole bunch of stuff before we can pass them to do anything additional. So there's actual evidence of that. And I think that's also a good point, AP. Shout out to you. And we're going to talk about the credibility of the staffer, the lie, because that does play into this as well. Didn't the staffer allegedly suggest making it appear as though he paid for the airline tickets? That's true as well. I think the biggest thing that's going to hurt his ability to use this case is Eric Adams just appeared to do too much stupid stuff. One, actually making the calls to these people on their own, like, hey, this is Eric Adams. Hey, get that building up violating these codes and regulations. That's fucking crazy work. You have somebody else do that. That's a problem. But two, the airline thing is actually a good point because the staffer tried to make it like, yo, we need a reasonable rate, not $50. But the other thing is they have Eric Adams via text messages and emails telling the staffer that, hey, here's the $10,000 to go down and pay the Turkish Airlines. And when they went and looked at the Turkish airline to see if any money was paid on Eric Adams' behalf, no money was paid. So that's giving shadiness. It's giving trying to cover up a quid pro quo. And it further supports, in my opinion, why a quid pro quo can be found based on the conduct of the parties. So I think that this is going to be a shit argument. But the biggest mistake that Eric Adams' attorney made is, hey, you shouldn't delve in and gave this argument. Hey, save this shit for court, bro. Let them be surprised when you get the argument. It's tough. Intent is not always illegal, even when we know. Therefore, proof of the act of intent becomes critical. I agree, and intent normally, intent is, I guess, from a legal, let's talk about a civil thing, because how they define intent legally is you intended to do something, or so to prove intent legally most times, and we're taking it out of a criminal context because it's a little bit different, but when you're talking about civilly, you have seen courts say intent can be proven by the specific intent to do something or knowledge with a substantial certainty. So, okay, even though I didn't have the specific intent to do harm to you, I knew that, hey, I sawed off one of the legs of the chair that you're about to sit in. And like, hey, it's 3 legs. He may not fall. He might wobble a little bit. Did I have the specific intent for you to bust your ass and break your butt cheek bone? No. But did I have knowledge with a substantial certainty that if I saw off one of the legs, you might fall and break your ass bone and fracture your ass muscle? Yes. So intent has these specific legal nuances depending on the context of which you're looking at it. But I do agree that it's a tough call. But I think Eric Adams' biggest issue that he made is he just did too much, bro. Like, I think he just went over the top and did too much with the direct contact, with his staffer trying to reach out to the airline to make it look like he's paying something that's substantial. And when the airline came back with $50, he said, no, make it look a little bit more reasonable, $1,000. It's just looking goofy. So I think that this is going to be a shit argument. I don't think that Benjamin is going to. Well, I think that the Supreme Court probably should look at this issue. if courts are split on it. I think that they probably should look at this issue. So I hope they hear this case. If they do, in fact, hear this case, I don't think it would be favorable for Benjamin. And I don't think Benjamin's argument is going to be favorable for Eric Adams. So again, it's going back to Eric Adams might be up Schitt's Creek without a paddle. Essentially, the cover-ups are going to bite him in the butt. I agree with that 100%. That is a great comment. When you do all the extra shit, and this is something I always talk about, it's one thing to do the crime, but the cover-up to the crime is what always seals the deal. The cover-up is what always seals the deal. So I think that's actually a great point. If Adam is guilty, Kenya should be looking at prison for life. Hey, I agree, but this actually goes to the fact of if we wanted to, this does have a small, very small Kenyan nuance, because in Adam's case, they're talking about 10 million in campaign contributions, thousands, tens of thousands of dollars, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars, and all this other stuff. The U.S. Attorney's Office, no matter what district they're in, out there in Illinois, they got a lot bigger fish to fry than Tiffany Henyard. So is she not going nowhere? Yeah. Then it was a series of acts that can be followed, like a breadcrumb trail can demonstrate intent of willful act. I agree 100%. Let's talk a little bit about this witness, okay? Because I think this is interesting, because normally what they say in attorney land is judges and courts decide issues of law, like in an issue of law. What is an issue of law? The definition of quid pro quo. Is it expressed or is it implied? The court said it has to be explicit. What does explicit mean? So courts, judges, panels of judges on appellate courts, they determine issues of law. And the definition of explicit for purposes of a bribe and a quid pro quo is an issue of law. What does it mean? Issues of fact, when we're looking at the facts of the case and when we're looking at the truthfulness and credibility of a witness, that's determined by a jury. So I think the fact that if you're filing a motion to dismiss, okay, it could be filed on two things. If it could be proven that the United States Attorney's Office withheld exculpatory evidence, that's a big no-no and a great grounds to file a motion to dismiss. Now, that doesn't mean that this indictment can't be done over and we can't be back here, because generally, and I know two prosecutors, one of which I worked with directly, who were both essentially sanctioned, and one actually went to jail for withholding evidence. So it does happen. I seriously fucking doubt it could happen, but I think the likelihood of it is small in this case, that they're withholding evidence as it relates to a politician. Because I mean, my point is, here's I have to give you discovery. Here's all the evidence I got. Do your best, because I'm about to bust your ass at trial. That's just kind of how I've always looked at it. But if they did withhold exculpatory evidence and a motion to dismiss is filed, strong reason to file a motion to dismiss. I don't know if they're going to find that here. Now, the veracity and credibility and truthfulness of the witness is a different thing. So I'm sure discovery hasn't been given over yet because it's just so early in this case. So again, another mistake he made is talk about what they're withholding is the fact that this witness said X, Y, or Z. That was a stupid thing to say, because you haven't even gotten your discovery yet. So you don't know if they're going to provide you with that information or not. And the fact that you just said what they didn't tell you, they're going to say, hey, make sure we put all of that, the lying shit that the witness may or may not have said, in the discovery so they have it. So they're going to cover their tracks. So when it comes to if exculpatory evidence was withheld, that's a very good reason to file a motion to dismiss and potentially win. But because it's so early, The defense attorney didn't even get discovery yet, but he already showed him his game plan. There's no way they're not going to include any inconsistencies that the witness may have made in the actual discovery. So now I don't think that they're going to withhold exculpatory evidence, especially with him saying that. That'll be fucking the stupidest thing they could possibly do. So now the motion to dismiss would be based on, hey, this witness is untruthful. And when they went on bathroom break, they went and deleted all of their apps and was trying to delete conversations. All of that is fine and dandy. All the prosecution has to do is disclose the untruthful conduct. And once they disclose it, that's not going to be a sufficient basis to dismiss the case. Because remember, questions of law are for the judge and the court to decide. Questions of fact, like, oh, okay, when he shot the person, did he really fear for his life, or did he shoot him because he just wanted to shoot somebody? That's a question of fact that goes to the jury. Quid pro quo, explicit. What does it mean? Express, implied. Question of law goes to the judge. Truthfulness of a witness. Is this person telling the truth? That's a question that goes to the jury. So the jury is going to have to decide if the witness in Eric Adams' case is being truthful, and that's solely up to them. A motion to dismiss based on the lack of veracity or truthfulness of the witness is not going to fly at all. But I thought it was some interesting arguments that were potentially being asserted. Did the higher-ups make these calls every day, like calling the building inspector or the fire chief? Well, it's a shame because they seem to have a good and fast response to certain issues like that fire. Yeah, I mean, that's their job. Everybody got a good, fast response, but everybody got a good, fast response on paper. I don't think, well, I don't think it's uncommon. I don't think it's uncommon for mayor to make a call to his fire chief to do something. I think the problem here is he made the call after the actual inspector went on the scene and said, yo, that building is fucked up. We can't in no way approve this building for whatever it is they're trying to approve it for, because there's over 60 deficiencies, and each of those deficiencies has multiple deficiencies within it, which we read in the indictment. Yeah, exactly. Trying to throw the hound dogs off the trail. I agree completely. Okay. Did they go looking for a crime with Adams? Would crimes have been found if he wasn't being watched? Like, I don't know. Like, me and one of my partners had this discussion as we were talking about Eric Adams. Let me see. I'm gonna pull up the conversation. Let me see. I'm gonna see if I can pull up the conversation, because I'm gonna tell y'all exactly what I said. And this applies to Eric Adams, okay? All right. This was Thursday. Are you going to do a segment on Eric Adams? And I was like, of course. And I said, what's going on? Black politicians are crashing and burning in 2024. It's sad for real. And he said, very sad. He said, let me see. Oh, where did he say? Okay. He said, reading a little excerpt now, we'll probably do a deep dive later. Politicians be on this type of shit, though we're not the only ones who indulge. I agree completely. All politicians self-deal. Honestly, if you don't do a little self-dealing as a politician, I'm probably not going to trust you as a politician. Like, hey, I expect politicians to self-deal. I just don't expect it to be super blatant. Do it the right way. Campaign contributions by corporations are legal. There are ways you can have corporations donate millions of dollars to your campaign, and you can actually control that money, even though that money isn't expressly in your bank account. But he said, we're not the only ones who indulge. I agree with. But this is what I said that I think applies to Eric Adams. I said, I agree. But as a black man, you should know that the level of scrutiny will be multiplied. And if you cross the line, you're not getting the benefit of the doubt. That's just what that's one of the first lessons I was taught starting law school. Like, hey, okay, just know if you're a minority, if you're a woman, if you're a minority, it's like what 3% African American men in the attorney field. Like, hey, if you cross the line, your line crossing is going to get looked at with more scrutiny. And in Eric Adams' case, just based on the facts that we have in the indictment, we don't know them to be absolutely true. But with what we read in the indictment, it doesn't look like it was a, while I'm walking the gray area, it looked like he hopped over the gray area into the forbidden zone in some of these instances with the things that we talked about, the certain type of cover-ups that were going on. Like, I just can't fathom. I mean, let's just think of it from a common sense standpoint, okay? If I was looking at this and this guy presumably got $10 million worth of campaign benefits because of these multipliers that he was not entitled to because they use straw donators, so to speak. Every year, you or your treasurer or whatever it said in the indictment had to sign off saying that our campaign was on the up and up. They went back and were looking at you for years. Now, if you have 1 year with things get a little bit funny with campaign contributions, but to have multiple years and they consistently sign off and sign off. One of the other arguments that his attorney made was, hey, there's also an email where he expressly said, do not take any foreign money. You know who says do not take foreign money? People who've been taking foreign money. I'm just saying, like, I find that wild to say, like, hey, we have an express email where we told our guys, do not, under any condition, take foreign money. Me, that wouldn't be some shit that I would even say as a politician, because I'm just kind of like, yo, we not. If you come rock with me, we're not doing anything to mess up this money. Because I know if it's anything related to money, the sledgehammer is going to come down. But I don't think that. I don't know. I think that was a wild point. Like, because you have an email where your client expressly tells his staff not to take foreign money, that don't mean that he's innocent. That means that he's like, oh, let me get it. To me, him having that email is consistent with him trying to get the airline to charge him a price that looks like a reasonable price. It's consistent with all the other attempts with the story that the staffer gave of him leaving this cash money for them to make a payment to the airlines. It's consistent with covering up wrongdoing. So when we talk about the 3 mistakes the attorney made, you have to be careful with what you say, because whatever you say that you think is advantageous to your case, it could be a swift kick in the nuts if you really take a chance and look at it. I just thought that was a crazy argument. That hey, I don't know. I thought that was a crazy argument. Hey, he got an email expressly telling them not to take foreign money. I mean, I don't know. That's kind of crazy. Yeah. But I mean, I think he was being watched, but let's just people who are susceptible to misconduct are going to have eyes on them. You know what I mean? And I think, and we talked about how this came to fruition, how they started watching Eric Adams. At one point, and I don't know if you tuned in yesterday, but how I believe they started watching Eric Adams. In the indictment, he had all of these dealings with businessman 1, 2, 3, and 4. One person owned the airline, another person had a construction company. All of these business persons had some ties or nexus to the Turkish government and or the Turkish community. It was one, I believe, business person 3, don't quote me on it, but it was business person 3 who had some legal issues, not only in Turkey, but in the United States. Adams' spokesperson or Adams' staffer, allegedly, according to the staffer, told Adams, we shouldn't meet with business person 3 because they kind of got some legal issues bubbling. Adams was like, you know what? Let's meet with them anyway. Adams meets with business person 3. They have a meeting. Adams comes back to New York or whatever it is. After that meeting, business person's 3 legal issues in the United States completely fucking explode. So now whatever level of heat he got on him from the feds, it's multiplied and it's public now. It's in the news. So business person 3, he hot. Back in the day, you're like, hey man, you hot right now. Get away from me. Business person 3 is hot. Business person 3, this is weird because I think this was probably the initial start of what some would call a setup, but I think is a normal tactic. Business person 3 reaches back out to Eric Adams' team, unsolicited. Business person 3, like, hey, we got some things we can do. But because business person 3 is so hot, the Adams team is like, nah, bro, we don't want to touch you. We good. So my thought and my thinking looking at that indictment, I think the heat, and we saw this when I did the case on the DC council member who took the bribe. It was the exact same fucking scenario. Somebody had heat and pressure on them by the feds. They said, hey, I know somebody who's doing wrong. That person went back out to talk to the politician. Eric Adams was smart enough to say, nah, I don't want to talk to you because you too hot. But I think that's how this all started. I think business person 3 who had that heat was what initially got the ball rolling. And then I think that business person, along with the staffer and their statements, regardless of whether or not they a liar or not, that's for the jury to decide. But that's how I think we ultimately ended up getting here in the first place. I'm a lay person. I took the attorney words that the Benjamin case was dismissed until I looked it up and found that it had been revived. Right? Like that's the worst case to you. So, I was like, why would you look? See, you looked it up. When I heard it, I was like, Benjamin Buttons? Who's this dude? We need to look it up and see what's going on here. But it's all interesting. Yeah. Sound like he is screwed to me. Hey, shout out to you, Bernie. I agree. Shout out to you. I think is looking rough. I think that 93% conviction rate is might tick up to 94. It might tick up to 97 because they might get Benjamin, and it might tick up to 97. They might get Benjamin. It looked like they might get Benjamin. They probably gonna get Diddy, and it looked like they gonna get Adams too. I got laughing at the facts because it's terrible. To see all this wrongdoing going on. But hey, I just want justice to prevail. If the evidence ain't there, hey, let them get there not guilty. But if the evidence is there, hey, you do your time. That's how the justice system works. Yeah. Maybe he had a foreign courtesy aficionado or collector. That could be it. Like that could, that remind me. I got some foreign currency. Not from any bribes. I got it on a recent work trip I went to. Yeah. Okay, let's see. Greer Jones with the comment. What concerned me was that they started grooming him early and allegedly expected him to become president soon. So they may have been watching him because of that. I agree. I did see that. They got him on him early when he was the Brooklyn borough up and coming guy. I do agree that. But that's actually a common thing. I mean, sometimes I'm not gonna say because the right side of the law, it depends on what position you're looking from. But on the prosecution side and on the prosecution side, just like these guys, like, hey, we found somebody who might become something. Let's see if we can lean on them early. Prosecutors do that as well because some people were asking, like, yo, if they knew all of this was going on, with these campaign things prior to him even running for mayor of New York, why did they wait? It could be they wanted more evidence. It could be, hey, let's wait. If he wins, this will be even a bigger case. It's not uncommon for law enforcement to kind of let things play out, to come back and take the bus down. It could be, some perceive it as additional evidence gathering. Some people on the outside say they just want the bust or the arrest or the prosecution to be bigger. I've actually seen cases where law enforcement were aware of a narcotics dealer in a neighborhood and probably had enough information to put them away for a moderately long time. But they say, you know what? Let's sit back and watch. And when they sat back and watched, what did this narcotics dealer do? He ends up blowing up to the point where, hey, when he had car shows in the hood, I mean, he had Ferraris, Lamborghinis, like he had an absolute car show. he blew up to the point, and they were still watching him. And when he got to a point where they was like, "Hey, we got enough evidence," or some people say he got big enough where the bus will be juicy, they knocked his ass down. They knocked his ass down so bad. So that happens on both sides. If you see, I mean, think about it. If you're a middle school, high school football coach, and you see a 6'3", 180-pound high school football player, you're gonna be like, you know what? Hey, I'm gonna put a little special interest in this kid over here, because this kid, hey, this LeBron James kid who's 6'3" in the 5th grade, he might be something. You know what? I get you some shoes. You know what? Don't worry about paying the registration for that summer league camp. I got you. I sponsor the team. So people try to get their claws in on the early side of the game. Hell, we all do it. We all try to get our claws in on the early side of the game. That's just kind of part of life and how it plays out. Yeah. A prosecutor is required to seek the truth and justice, not victory. Therein lies the issue, though. What is one person's truth during a trial isn't another person's truth. So, and that's the thing, that your truth and we can all observe the same facts. And what you saw as your truth is completely different from my truth, what I saw. That's just kind of what it is. That's what makes the law so tricky and so complicated. Because I think, as a matter of course, I've been in situations where I've worked an investigation in a case, and after looking at it, I was like, you know what? There's nothing here. We've peeled back every layer of this onion. We moved every stone. As much as something strange was going on, I don't have enough to prove it, so I'm gonna let it go. I think most prosecutors are doing that, and I think that I'm not going to say most, because I can't speak for all, but I can say for investigations that I've done, prosecutors that I've worked with, they've been very good about, yo, let's just overcharge them and hope that they get something. Wow, most prosecutors that I've worked with or against, they're pretty good about, like, I've had cases where they was like, you know what, we're just going to have to let this one go because it's flimsy. And most prosecutors stand on that. Now, there are some bad apples out there, as with everything. But what is determined to be the truth? Truth is in the eye of the observer, and we all observe things differently. It's like that. Y'all remember that big social media thing that was going around? Look at this dress. Is it gold or is it blue? And some people saw gold and some people saw blue. And it's because we all perceive colors differently, because the cone in my eye is mutated as a person who's colorblind, and it may not be in yours. And so, truth is based on the eye of the person perceiving it. Yeah, they verbalized it on page 27. Okay, shout out to you. I appreciate that. So this further supports that the argument is terrible. I appreciate that comment. I appreciate that comment. Shout out to that. And I appreciate y'all always come back and correcting me, because I couldn't recall if it was verbalized or not. So I definitely appreciate that. And I know we read 27 because we got about the page 38. It was like, not counting the exhibits, because I wasn't going through all of those pictures. But yeah, true. But reality is it's about a win via creative narrative. I got that as an insurance person. I'm always about the narrative. I agree. Let's see. If they say Puff, if they say Puff lifted Adam's baby oil, I'm done. Isn't that wild that, like, just like it was all good just a week ago? They get it. They had the keys to the city. That's a crazy picture. That's a crazy picture, considering both of those people got indicted a year later. That's wild. I know. I saw a TikTok where it was like the CEOs at Johnson and Johnson were going to be upset about the fourth quarter profits during this calendar year for the lack of baby oil sales. It's all good, bro. You ain't missed nothing. Long story short, I don't know. I don't think it's looking good for Eric Adams. That's the long story short of it. Yeah, yeah. Just in time, man. Just in time, bro. Let me see. So Adams can take government bribes to house immigrants, but can't take a free private plane ride. I mean, it is what it is. Like, I mean, one, I just don't. I mean, I don't know. I can't speak on the specific politics of New York because to me, most places that are overly blue or red tend to be terribly ran. Like Los Angeles is terribly ran, California is terribly ran, but I also think that Mississippi is terribly ran. So typically I tend to like a balance, but that's a fair point. Adams can take government bribes to house immigrants, but can't take them for a free flight. That's a whole nother story for a whole nother day. That's a whole nother political thing that I'm not gonna dive into right now. But I see your point though. Yeah, I know, right? I can't ever see Puff ashy. His skin must be really well moisturized. That's funny. Y'all hilarious. New York is crazy. I agree. New York is crazy as well. Yeah. Will Adams do prison time? With the charges that he got, he's looking at I think 45 years, potentially 45 years in custody, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know if that's the minimum or the max, but with the 5-count indictment that he got, I believe it's 45 years. I'm not sure if that's the minimum or the max, but 45 years is a long ass. That's a long ass time. Like he's saying all the right stuff, which is nothing. I only heard him give one speech, and I don't think Adam said anything that would particularly harm his interest, even though I'm just not a fan of people talking about shit in the public forum. Because, I mean, the best you can do in the public forum is try to potentially sway the jury pool ahead of time, but is going to be split 50-50. During Adams' press conference, I heard half of the crowd saying the charges are trumped up and just shouting out stuff. And then I heard the other half of the crowd saying, lock his ass up. I was like, so that's why I've never been a big proponent of trying to fight out a court case in the eyes of the public, because unless you have like something like it takes like video footage to substantially sway a prospective jury pool on a wide range. So, and that is something we don't have. If they had like an actual audio of him saying something or doing something, man, that thing would probably get leaked so fast. But I think it's a strong possibility. Like I said, of all the districts, U.S. Attorney's Office, the Southern District of New York do not play, especially when it comes to public corruption. That's a public corruption is a federal mandate that's handed down by the U.S. Attorney himself. That's further handed down by, so I mean, I just don't think. I mean, I don't know. I think there's a strong likelihood that if you get indicted in the Southern District of New York with charges that could, even if it's a minimum, or let's say it was a maximum of 45 years, whatever it is a strong possibility that you might have to go and sit down at Club Fed. Adams might have enough pull to go to Club Fed. He might have enough pull to go to Club Fed. Yeah. All that sanctuary stuff backfired on a lot of people. J&J wants the last quarter to finish strong. Diddy out for at least 2 weeks, please. That's funny, yeah. You think Adams' attorney will be able to raise reasonable doubt? Ah, I mean, I don't. That's a difficult. It's a difficult thing to answer because right now we have 90 to 100% of the meat and potatoes of the government's dish that they're cooking. Only thing we waiting for the government is the vegetables. Like, the turkey's done, the yams done, the macaroni and cheese. We waiting on the cornbread and the vegetables to when it comes to the government's presentation of the fact. When it comes to the Eric Adams defense, we really didn't get anything. We got something about the truthfulness, which is an issue of fact for the jury to decide, which we already talked about. We got another case that doesn't look like it's analogous enough or comparable enough to the facts in his case. So, like, we just don't have enough. I'm gonna just go on a limb and say I'm gonna say no just based on what we have. And I'm gonna be honest, like y'all probably like, man, DFD, Marcus, you real pro prosecution. I'm actually probably the best person to have on a jury because I'm like, nah, bro. Even though I know it looks strong now, if I'm on that jury, I'm like, nah, bro, I gotta hear everything. I'll be like, I gotta hear everything before I make a decision. Like, so I'm pretty objective when it comes to that, especially since I started. I always look at every case from a defense attorney standpoint because I started out as a defense attorney for years. So I always look at it like, oh man, soon as even when I and my investigators hate it because as soon as they bring me something, I'd be like, well, what about this? What about this? What about this? I start instantly picking it apart. But I don't think he's going to be able to raise. He only has to convince 1 out of 12. I don't think he's going to be able to get a not guilty, but there's a possibility he could find 1 out of 12 to potentially get a hung jury, and then there's a question of, is the United States Attorney's Office going to want to retry that case? Yeah. And his best friend, the chief advisor who and that's when I knew everything was going downhill. Like the chief advisor, the husband's brother. Once everybody around you start getting raided and by the feds, it's only a matter of time. She was getting off a plane. They were waiting on her. Definitely. Jason. Yeah, y'all with the Johnson and Johnson joke. That's hilarious. Who is paying Adams attorney's fees and how much are his attorneys being paid per hour? I don't know. That's a good question. I actually I don't know. Let's see if we could do it. I don't know what the hourly rate is, but the hourly rate for his attorney, shit, I'm probably guessing for his attorney, man, you might be talking shit. For them to appear in court, probably $1,000, $750, $1,000 or more than that, on a minimum. On a minimum, if I were representing him on a minimum, and his attorney look a lot older than me, but if I were representing him on a minimum, Eric Adams, like, nah, bro, I'm not representing him for anything. If I wanted to give him a discount, I would probably charge him $750 an hour. That's at a discount price. I probably wouldn't give him a discount because that case gonna be hard. Nah, bro, you don't get no discount. This shit look like it's about to be a difficult case for me that I got to do a lot of work. Let me see. Let's see. Let's take a look. Okay, this is good. I don't know if y'all remember when Elon Musk uh had his little civil fraud trial. I did a review on it because I knew they weren't going to find him guilty. Because why would Elon Musk try to tank his own stock when probably 90% of his assets is his stock? But it looks like this is interesting. Let's go ahead before we get out of here. Let's take a look at his attorney and see what Alex Spiro has going on. Let's take a look. We like to look at the attorneys. Now I'm reading this from Business Insider, so it's probably a little bit biased. I'm not even going to go to his website. I saw this article. Meet the brash lawyer that everyone from Eric Adams to Alec Baldwin and Elon Musk turns to in a crisis. Alex Spiro is once again at the heart of a legal case everyone is talking about. The litigator is bringing his hard charging tactics to a federal criminal case against New York City Mayor Eric Adams. Blah, blah, blah. Prosecutors allege, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Let's get to the meat and potatoes. The famed attorney jumped into the case, promising to swiftly file a motion to dismiss. Spiro is perhaps best known for his work for Elon Musk. He represented the world's richest person in a defamation case and multiple other lawsuits. Business Insider's reporter Jack Newsom, Spiro in 2022 article, charting the lawyer's rise. He's a technician litigator who's always loved being in the middle of the action. That's all litigators. He represented Alec Baldwin after the actor shot someone on film set. Hey, hey, that's crazy. That was a whole crazy litigation. The manslaughter case against Baldwin was dropped earlier this year after Spiro argued that prosecution hid key evidence before trial. So, hey, he got some. Hey, I told you, if he can prove that they're hiding exculpatory evidence, good way to get a dismissal. Now Spiro finds himself at the thick of a historic case as Adam defends himself. Let me see. Let's see. Well, I mean, I don't know. We can't speak to him, but I'm sure Eric Adams for this case, man, I would probably charge him $1,500 an hour. I'm gonna be honest, because if you're representing, you got to think like, all right, let's say my normal rate is, let's say $500 an hour, which is light. $500 an hour is light for a New York attorney who's a really good attorney, I think. But let's say my rate is $500 an hour, and then the mayor of DC was like, "Yo, DFD, I need you. I saw your videos. Hey, holla at me, right?" I'd be like, "Yo, if you want me to represent you in your case, you're taking me away from the cases that I were working on because you want me to take priority here. I got to allocate other resources of my firm here." So, I mean, man, that dude probably billing him $1,000 or more easily an hour, and he probably asked for a retainer. He probably asked for a retainer. Let's see. I remember for attempted murder charge, and this was in 2019, an attorney telling me like, "Oh, I asked for a retainer of about $30,000." And this was like a local small town attorney. So, man, the retainer this guy probably asking for is probably in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not 1 million, like one clean $1 million to represent you. Yeah, he's not stepping down. Everybody wants him to step down. I'm always on the side of, bro, if you don't need the money, step down because let's if you've done something wrong, right? Let's just think of this from this is how I look at it. If you have the means to step down and you're a politician charged with something, go ahead and step down because if you've done something wrong, once you step down, you immediately cut off any additional evidence, any additional new crimes, any addition. That's the thing that's kicking Tiffany Henyard in the ass. She's not stepping down. So she keeps doing fuck shit that keeps leading to potential new charges, would keep new fresh statute of limitations just born every time she does something that's potentially illegal. So I'm always a fan of go ahead, step down if you have the means to step down, because you just kind of cut off the faucet of potential evidence of your wrongdoing. Now, once you stay in office, what if somebody reach out to you like, "Hey, man, remember that thing we talked about in 2019? You have all this other stuff that could potentially stand up." But I don't think he's going anywhere. He seems kind of egotistical and arrogant. If it were me, I would step down. And if it were my client, I would be like, "Hey, can you bear the financial burden of stepping down?" Because also, let's just be honest, like, he lost so many heads within his leadership group. How effective is he at actually running the government? Like, I mean, I don't know if he was doing a great job to begin with. Personally, I'm like, and I've talked to a couple of friends about him recently as this developed, and nobody got the warm and fuzzies when they talked about how he is as a mayor. But I don't think he's gonna step down. He's done too. He was doing the most. Facts. That's funny. Hey, I'm not saying they didn't, but back to my text message that I said, hey, when e- everybody don't play by the same rules. Unfortunately, that's just how it is. Everybody doesn't play by the same rules. There were some politicians who of so, who are white. There's some politicians who are black who do it and they know how to do it well. The biggest problem with people who commit bribes is most people don't know how to do it. Most people don't know how to start a foundation. Most people don't know how to properly launder money. Most people know how to steal money and accept bribes, but very few people know how to take stolen money or illegally obtained money and manipulate it in a way where you can put it into your account and it's clean. Me and my father just had this conversation. If you get illegal money, then you expressly use that illegal money to put it in your bank account or for benefits, you're probably going to be fucked. Because the biggest part is you get illegal money, then you have to have a vehicle to launder and wash that money. Then you can put that money into your account and use it for the extravagant stuff. Most people who don't know what they're doing, they don't know how to do that intricate middle part, which is probably the most important part. Which is probably the most important part. But I agree. But again, this guy is an older black guy. He's been around for a while. He's old enough and smart enough to know that whatever it is he does, be it legal, illegal, or if he operates in the gray area. Let's give him the benefit of the doubt. Let's say he's operating in the gray area. It's not a violation of the rules, but it's not illegal. He's just stretching close as he can to violating the rules, but not violating it, which is what you hire attorneys to do. How can I do this without violating? Let's say he's walking in that gray area. This dude old enough, he's an old ass black guy from the civil rights movement. He should know that his gray area walk is going to get looked at with a much higher level of scrutiny. It is what it is. If you don't know that in 2024, and that dude looked like he probably marched during the civil rights era or something. I mean, I don't know. I just think it's a fatal flaw to be like, man, all these other guys did it, so why not me? Because you're not them. That's just kind of what it is. That's just is it fair? No, it's not fair. But hey, life's not fair. This system isn't fair. That's just kind of what it is. You have to operate with the rules that are made up in the environment with which you are living in. That's just kind of what it is. That's kind of my thought. But I do agree. People do it all the time. Yeah. Adams was most likely sloppy thinking that turn, and I agree 100%. I think that his attorney can try to raise reasonable doubt, but I don't think there is more to come than an ongoing investigation. His staff was very busy. I agree, and that's what it is. You're charged with a crime. You want to find an affirmative defense, like, oh, I shot the person, but it was justified because it was self-defense. But if you can't find an affirmative defense, which is no affirmative defense for what's alleged here, now you get to like, okay, now you're trying to look at jury nullification. Like, okay, I don't have an affirmative defense. They're trying to make a legal argument as their defense, but it's not necessarily an affirmative defense. But they're going to try to make hey, it has to be expressed, implied argument. When he brought up that case, I guess that's where they're going. I'm assuming. But they're going to try for jury nullification, and I just call that muddy in the waters. I look at the facts and be like, man, these facts are fucked against my client. Well, can I create enough doubt not to convince all 12, but to convince maybe one or two people that this isn't what we thought it was? If I could just get, because they only got to get one person. And a hung jury is a win. A hung jury is a win. Now, again, the government can always, hey, we're going to retry this case again. But that's their best bet that they can go for now is a hung jury. And hopefully they get some hardcore Eric Adams supporter on that jury. That's the best thing they could ask for. The attorneys are being paid by the business and real estate interests because they love Adams. That's fair. All real estate interests love Adams. They do, yeah. Yeah. He said 750 is a discount. 750 is a discount for an attorney in New York? Come on, an attorney in New York? I literally just had a case and attorney fees were, I think they settled somewhere. Of course, they overinflated them. They was like, our attorney fees is $1,000 an hour. And we was like, bro, your fees can't be. So attorney's fees are always argued in civil litigation, like if somebody got to pay them. So people go back and forth. And I think they split the baby at like $700 an hour. And this was in a southern state. $700 an hour in a southern state. So $750 an hour for attorney in New York, like that's like That's like a rate that a fifth year attorney would probably charge. Maybe a third year attorney would probably charge in New York. He probably had to bribe you for the retainer. That's hilarious. Yeah. Oh, no, that's funny. Yeah. Jose Bay has some white collar crimes. He probably try to bribe you to cover a retainer. Nah, bro. I ain't taking no bribes over here. I'm good. I don't need to stay at the finest Turkish establishments. I don't even want to go to Turkey. So yeah, it's free money for him and Tiffany's attorneys. Facts. Exactly. The same question I have about Henya. How are you running the township with staff dropping like flies? I agree. You can't govern effectively. But I think that Eric Adams is probably sitting on some money. Tiffany Henya, I don't know. It's distracting from being able to effectively do the job, which is unfair to municipality. I agree, but that's the other part of it. Like, how much do you care? The DC council member who got charged with bribing, bro, was caught on camera and audio and everything, putting the money in his seersucker suit. But like, you don't step down after that. How effective can you be at your job of serving the people? I agree, especially after the Southern District had the thing with Trump. They can't let Adams thing go, even if they wanted to. I agree as well. Eric Adams is 64. Okay, he not ancient, but he's old enough. He's old enough to know better. Y'all go listen to Eric Adams' voice and tell me he don't sound like Hustle Man or Martin. Yeah, okay, yeah, I remember. I remember reading about Jimmy Walker because they made a bad good times joke. Who was mayor until 1932. William O'Dwyer held office until 1950. Both stepped down during investigations into their administration, though neither were ever charged. I think that is an absolute great point. But I think that's always the route to go. I think that's a sign of a politician who actually gives a damn about his constituents because in the light of a federal investigation and or indictment, it's very difficult to do your job effectively because you're worried about what's going on outside of the day-to-day operation. So hey, that is a very good point. And I think it is always best for them to step down, in my personal opinion. I'm in Chicago. We just hope you can cover parking downtown. Oh, shout out to Chicago. Shout out to you for joining the chat. Hey, Parker downtown. I got a colleague from Chicago. Yeah. First New York mayor to be indicted. Yeah. First sitting mayor to be indicted. That's a bad thing to go down for is the first. Yeah. I'm in the Chi too, North Side, Old Town, Cabrini area. Okay. Yeah. That's where my colleague is from. My colleague is from Hey, could bring my colleague is from like we had this discussion because hey, some people hey, well, it's some people in the chat who have known me from the early years, and we ain't grew up in the greatest of places, so we all like to get around and talk about where we from, and yeah, I think without a shadow of a doubt, Chicago is probably one of the toughest overall neighborhoods that I've seen in my life. And I've been in New York. I lived in New York for a minute. I've been to LA, Crip Town, Blood Town. You can't wear Jordans because they don't like the color. Chicago, though, is a different kind of animal. Yeah, what are your thoughts on Giuliani being disbarred? Doesn't matter at this point. He can still consult. Hey, when you can't solve the problem, make money by prolonging it. Consulting. That's their motto. But hey, Giuliani probably should have been disbarred years ago. Like, which is so crazy. Like the thing that gets me about Giuliani, like, and I'm not a I remember, I can remember doing 9/11 because I was relatively new soldier at the time. And Giuliani had like I remember at one point hearing people talk about like Giuliani should run for president. That's crazy. The fall from grace between let me see, it's two people who had a fall from grace. Giuliani is one because I remember expressly like seeing him on Dateline, how he just stomped out reduced crime in the city, and the handling of 9/11, and he had all these iconic moments that ensued after 9/11, and people were talking about like Giuliani for president, and then that dude just kind of fell off. But he probably should have been disbarred years ago. I mean, between the filing of frivolous lawsuits, his hair sweating off doing live TV, that ain't got nothing to do with his license, but it's just all a bad look. When you on live TV and the hair dye is running off in your eyes as an attorney, you need a, I don't know, that's just a bad look. And I'm gonna start to question your faculty. And Giuliani is old as hell too. Like as you get older, you may not be able to, your long-term and or short-term memory may not be as sharp as it is. So I mean, I think him not having a law license should have occurred a long time ago. I think he filed a lot of frivolous lawsuits, and doing that is problematic as well. So yeah, Adam is not stepping down because the next two people in line are far left of him. Yeah. Oh yeah. So he's the last hope. It looks like. That's a good point. Shout out to that comment. I didn't know. I didn't know. I'm not up to snuff on my New York politics. Do you think Rico is in the future? I saw where he had staff that was shaking a business down. Um, Rico's are easy cases to go with. That's why it was made. Uh, but you rarely see it like because I think Henyard has Rico exposure, but Rico is something that's rarely used on politicians. We don't see it used as much as it could be used on politicians. I don't know if there's like an internal policy where they like, yo, we're not going to use RICO statutes to go after government officials. I can see how it would make shit crazy, especially with sometimes the Justice Department could be used as a tool of a political party on either side. Even though that shouldn't happen, some people want those things to happen. If you start using RICO, because RICO was created to go after the mob when they couldn't nail them down with specific things, but we said, yo, you're running a criminal organization. So I think it's a very sketch road to go down to start charging politicians with hitting them with RICO charges. That's just my thought. Like, could they be charged with RICO violations? Absolutely, 100% yes. Are they often charged with RICO statutes? Absolutely, 100% not, because I think that's just a crazy area that nobody wants to go down. 2K. See, I said $750 an hour was a discount. I said at a minimum $1,000 to $1,500. That's about right. I mean, that's about right because he's probably not taking any other cases. He got to actually be out with this guy. And as an attorney, it's one thing to hire me when I'm sitting at my desk. But when I have to get up and actually go to court, there's additional fees associated with that because you're talking travel expenses, other stuff I can't do, fuel. Like, I mean, like it's the fee structure for attorneys is wild. The fee structures for attorneys is wild. And then you got to think about it. Well, how could I say this? It's gonna sound fucked up when I say it. Isn't that fucked up for me as an attorney? But I get it. But attorneys are able to charge reasonable fees, and there's been court cases and people have been brought before the bar to discuss like what's a reasonable fee. And courts have given attorneys and professionals much discretion. Why have courts given attorneys discretion when it comes to the reasonableness of their fees? Because the courts are attorneys and they're not going to jam up their guys from being able to make money. It's the same thing they talk about AI, and AI is taking over all these jobs. And I've seen people like, oh, AI is going to take over the jobs of attorneys. No, it won't. Yeah, you can get AI to write a brief for you, give you a legal argument, all of that stuff. But AI is not going to take the job of an attorney because AI will never take the job of a judge. And the judge is never going to let AI take the actual job of an attorney. You can do some things, AI, but stay over there. We're going to give these guys an opportunity to make money. That's just kind of the name of the game. hey, I apologize. If it's any consolation, like we try to be reasonable and fair. I've taken cases for free. I've taken cases just because I see somebody in court and I knew they were about to get ramrodded, and I was like, you know what? I don't like the way this thing is about to go down, so let me try to help them out. I can't breathe without thinking about the Candy Man. Hey, in fact, that was the first thought too. As soon as I heard of it, I was like, Candy Man. I was like, that's hilarious. Yeah, that's hilarious and true. Hey, '80s baby here too. Yeah, yeah. He was recently charged with something, Rudy. Yeah. I mean, people are getting charged left and right. Giuliani was always bullish and questionable ethics. 9/11 was his temporary grace, which elevated his profile. Because I remember, like, I never really kept an eye on, like, I just remember at that time I was probably a teenager. I remember, like, all the stuff I heard about Giuliani was in rap songs, and it wasn't good. Okay, I think that's when New York had the stop and frisk shit going on, if I'm not mistaken, which is unconstitutional as fuck. But I think Giuliani was it. Am I wrong? Was Giuliani the person who initiated the stop and frisk or something like that? Don't say I know. I said we say it one more time. You got to say it in front of a mirror, don't you? But I don't know. I get like Candyman was always. I love horror movies. I'm a horror guy, and Candyman. Everybody who died at the hands of Candyman, I was like, y'all absolutely deserve it. Y'all had to specifically say this dude name like a certain amount of times. You just got to the second time and was like, nah, I'm good. That's wild. Yeah. Yeah, I think they use that more for gangs and drug cases. Yeah, they do. It again, it could be used. It could absolutely 100% be used, and facts could fit into it for a politician. Because I talked about that on that video when we looked at the 5 top charges that Tiffany Henyard could likely be charged with. But I agree, it could be used, but once you use RICO to start going after politicians, oh my God, that'll be a terrible precedent to set. And I don't think about it. A politician appoints the United States attorney, the U.S. attorney for the United States, the head of the Department of Justice. Like, what? What? That would be crazy. That would be crazy. If I'm the president of the United States and I want to assign somebody as the United States attorney to be the head of DOJ, and I ask him as a president, and I'm a president, I'm probably gonna try to follow the law. I'm not gonna do a lot of self dealing. I'm gonna get my money on the back end with a book like everybody else. But if I ask, like, hey, what do you think about using RICO for politicians? And they say, oh, I think it's something we can explore. I'm like, next. I'm like, nope, we can't put that dude in office. I agree. Perhaps with politicians, the precedent would be set to apply to. Yeah, I agree. I agree. It's just it would open. It's like this concept, like you don't want to do certain things in courtroom that would open floodgate litigation, and this will open the door. Like, oh my goodness, you would see RICO charges against the blue, the red, the donkey, the mule, the camel, the elephant. It would get absolutely ridiculous. So I do agree with that. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay. I agree. AI is terrible. AI only can develop information from the information that it has readily available. So I agree with that completely. Stop and Frisk was around too damn long. Honestly, upstate New York resident, so I pay attention. Okay, shout out to you. I agree. I mean, like, yeah, Stop and Frisk is wild. Shout out to that. It was absolutely ridiculous. It's absolutely unconstitutional. And I'm not a fan or proponent of violating constitutional rights in most capacities. Yeah. Yep, Giuliani had purposeful profiling based on race, if I recall correctly, as cause to search. Yeah, I remember all the rappers talking about Giuliani and everything they said. It was annotated around something bad. That was in the late '90s, early 2000s, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. When will Tim go down? 3 years, 5 to 10 years? I don't know. I think we're gonna see something sooner than later. But is she still committing potential acts that could be criminal. So she's just giving herself a fresh starting statute of limitations clock every day. Yeah, I'm rooting for after November. Yeah, this year. I'm rooting before 2025, after November, but before Christmas. And I want them to arrest her at the skating rink that she bought purportedly with taxpayer money. I want her to get arrested at just ice justice. I think it would be a beautiful irony. Yeah, Michael Bloomberg and Giuliani. Oh, okay. Mayors Michael Bloomberg and Rudy Giuliani stop and frisk. Okay. Yeah, I remember Bloomberg was one of the reinstating it and all that stuff. Yeah, stop and frisk is absolutely terrible. I believe stop and frisk was only looked at closely when that young man got choked out. I think right before George Floyd. Yeah, yeah. It always takes some terrible shit like that to happen. But yeah, you shouldn't be to stop and frisk a person is terrible. You can only that's to even stop a person. I mean, you got to have a reasonable suspicion that criminal activity is afoot to even conduct an investigatory stop. Then to actually pat them down, you have to have another expectation that they have some type of weapon. And yeah, they was just stopping random black people who wore big ass clothes and Avrex jackets. That shit was an absolute travesty. Yo, but that was it for this video. We covered some interesting topics. I'm gonna try to come back and do a put some for the folks on replay. I'm gonna try to come back and it is a pain in the ass to put timestamps on it because the arguments always kind of go left field. But we're gonna try to get everything worked out. I agree. I think that's what I want. It'll be beautiful. Tomorrow we're gonna cover the township meeting that was held this week. It was over 2 hours long, and I love y'all dearly. I do, but I couldn't sit down and do a 2 hour video that I'm simultaneously reacting to. We'd be in this bitch for 65 hours. Pardon my language. But we would literally be here for 65 hours. So I found a truncated video. Let's see, any idea how other countries deal with corrupt politicians? It depends, because I mean, some countries corrupt politicians are in charge. Other countries corrupt politicians are in charge. So I don't know. That's an actual good idea. I don't know. I may have to look at that. Yeah. Oversold loose cigarettes, for what I understand. A young man. Oh yeah. I remember that. I remember that 100%. I appreciate y'all as well. I'm about to tap out of here. Tomorrow we may do a Hinyard thing, but it's going to be a little late because I think we're gonna go see that new Halle Berry movie, which probably gonna be terrible, but hopefully it isn't. And anyway, y'all be blessed. Y'all have a good weekend. Be safe out there. Hey, remember, take care of yourself, take care of your family, do the right thing, especially if you're walking on that gray line. Don't fall over the gray line. Stay within the gray line. Don't fall over it. Y'all be safe. Peace.